Okay, so let's talk about the Statue of Liberty. You probably think you know its story, but what if I told you one of the world's most famous icons wasn't actually meant for America at all? We're going to dive into the incredible and kind of improbable story of how Lady Liberty really came to be.
So let's start with the statue's biggest, most surprising secret. Like I said, Lady Liberty was never meant for America. Nope. Her story actually kicks off thousands of miles away, over on the shores of the Mediterranean.
All right, take a look at this. It kind of looks familiar, but not quite, right? Well, this was actually the very first version of the statue. It was designed way back in 1867 by the French sculptor Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. And his vision for this colossal figure wasn't for New York Harbor, but as a giant lighthouse for the entrance of Egypt's brand new Suez Canal.
But, there was just one tiny problem. Okay, a major problem. The project was absolutely massive, super expensive, and in the end, the Egyptian government they balked at the price tag. So this left Bartholdi with this spectacular design and this huge ambition, but suddenly he needed a new home for it. So here's where it gets really interesting. You see how Bartholdi just repurposed his whole vision? He was totally fascinated by the giant statues of ancient Egypt, and especially the legendary Colossus of Rhodes, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. He just took that ancient inspiration and completely reimagined it for a new nation that was celebrating its independence, America.
Okay, so how does an idea for Egypt evolve into the icon we all know and love today? Well, while the idea might have started in Egypt, the monument itself was completely redesigned, from the ground up, to be a uniquely American symbol.
So fast forward to 1876. It's America's centennial year, and Bartholdi officially copyrights his design. But here's a great little piece of trivia for you. Its official name? It wasn't Liberty Enlightening the World. Nope. It was actually registered as the Statue of American Independence. Pretty cool, huh? And this is where we see a really key design change. Originally, the plan was for Liberty to hold a broken chain in her hand, but Bartholdi later moved those chains down to her feet. It's still a super powerful symbol of freedom from oppression, just a little more subtle. And then he replaced that chain in her hand with the tablet we all recognize today, the one inscribed with the date of American independence. Now, can you imagine this? After the whole thing is finally built in Paris, the entire 151-foot statue has to be painstakingly taken apart again, piece by piece. It was then packed into more than 200 massive wooden crates and loaded onto a French naval ship, the Isère. And that ship then set off for what turned out to be a really stormy, pretty perilous 27-day voyage across the Atlantic.
So let's think about this for a second. How on earth do you build a 450,000-pound statue and make sure it can withstand, a century of hurricane-force winds and all that salty sea air in New York Harbor? Well, the answer lies in a truly revolutionary design. The real genius of it is this 2-part construction. You've got a thin outer layer, this copper skin, which is what gives the statue her shape. But the real strength, the backbone, comes from a flexible internal iron skeleton. And get this, it was designed by none other than Gustave Eiffel. Yeah, that Eiffel, right before he went on to build his famous tower. And check this out. That beautiful copper skin, it's unbelievably thin. We're talking just 3/32 of an inch. To give you some perspective, that's about the thickness of 2 pennies stacked on top of each other. That's it. And yet somehow this incredibly delicate skin has managed to endure for over 100 years. But this brilliant design had a huge destructive secret built right into it. See, when you put 2 different metals, like iron and copper, together, especially in a salty, wet place like a harbor, a chemical reaction kicks off. The iron basically sacrifices itself to protect the copper, and it just rusts away at an incredible speed. The scientific name for this process is galvanic corrosion. So for decades, rainwater was just seeping in through all these little seams and rivet holes. And that internal iron skeleton, it started to rust away, just as you'd expect. The expanding rust then started pushing the copper skin apart at the seams. It's crazy to think about. The statue was slowly, silently destroying itself from the inside out. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. Originally, the statue was meant to be a monument to the friendship between France and America. That was the whole point. But its most famous identity, the one we all know, as this beacon of hope for immigrants, well, that whole meaning came about almost by accident. You know these words, right?
Give me you're tired, you're poor. They're world famous, written by the poet Emma Lazarus, and they're basically synonymous with the statue now. But here's the thing, her poem, The New Colossus, was originally written for a fundraiser, just to help pay for the statue's pedestal. It was never intended to define the statue's entire meaning. And if you look at this timeline, you can see it took almost 50 years for that poem to really merge with the statue's identity. It all starts in 1903 with just a simple plaque inside. Then, during World War I, the government starts using her image on war bond posters to appeal to immigrants. And it's not until 1936 that President Franklin D. Roosevelt really cements that connection in a famous speech, officially transforming liberty into the Mother of Exiles. All right, let's talk about how the statue has physically changed over the last century. Because it has. We'll go from its original shiny copper color all the way to a life-saving restoration that really gave it a new lease on life. Okay, first things first, that iconic green color. It's not rust, it's not damage, not at all. It's actually a natural protective coating called a patina, and it formed over about 30 years. And it's absolutely essential. This green layer is literally what has saved that thin copper skin from just corroding away in the harsh sea air. By the 1980s, though, that internal damage we talked about, the galvanic corrosion, it was severe. A massive restoration project had to be launched. I mean, every single one of the 1,800 iron support bars had to be replaced with stainless steel. And the original torch, which, by the way, had been modified with these glass windows that just leaked like crazy, well, that had to go too. And that original torch, it's a beast. It weighs a massive 3,600 pounds. It was so carefully removed from Lady Liberty's hand back in 1984. Today, if you visit, you can see it. It's preserved and on display in a museum right there on Liberty Island, so you can see it up close. So in its place, a stunning new torch was lifted into position. This one was built to be a perfect replica of Bartholdi's original design, solid copper, and the flame, it's covered in gleaming 24-karat gold leaf to make sure it shines brightly for at least another century. So when you really look back on it all, the statue story is just one of constant evolution, isn't it? It started as an idea for Egypt, got redesigned for America, was engineered by an absolute master, and then a poet came along and gave it a whole new meaning. Her physical form has changed, and so has what she stands for. And that just leaves you with one big question, right? After a century as the Mother of Exiles, what will Lady Liberty come to represent in her next century?